District 12. I'm Nadine Shanti, a member of the League. This forum is being live streamed to our League YouTube channel. To those in the virtual space, thank you for joining us. Let me provide some background on the position of Washington State Senator. Members of the legislature enact or reject legislation affecting public policy in the state, provide for the levy and collection of taxes and other revenue to support state government and assist local government, and they appropriate funds for these purposes. The Senate is made up of 49 members, one from each legislative district in the state. One half the membership of the Senate is up for election each even-numbered year. This is a partisan office, and candidates may declare a party affiliation. It is the policy of the League to be nonpartisan. Therefore, we neither endorse nor oppose candidates or parties. Legislative District 12 runs east and west across the Cascade Range. It includes the Snohomish County cities of Monroe, Salton, Gold Bar, and Index. Candidates for legislative senator are Keith Goehner and Jim Mayhew. The rules for participation in this forum were sent ahead of time to all candidates, and they have agreed to follow them. I will pose the questions and will clearly state the amount of time allowed for each answer. We are using a countdown timer visible to all candidates, and time limits on answers will be strictly enforced. The order for the first question was chosen randomly and will be Keith Goehner, followed by Jim Mayhew. I will then alternate candidates in the starting position to ensure a fair sequence. So let's begin. Candidates will have 90 seconds each to respond to the first two questions. Mr. Goehner, we'd like to start with you. What are the major issues you feel need to be addressed by this office? Please explain why you are focusing on these issues.
Well, thank you. So I guess, it's really difficult to come up with 2 or 3 issues in this time, because where we are as a state, we have some real significant issues. But the number one priority that people have indicated, and I believe is something that we still need to address, is public safety. We've made some changes in law enforcement patterns. How we enforce laws, what the law enforcement officers can do. So, I think those are the kinds of things that still need to be adjusted. We still need to be considering that. Another key item is the affordability of the state of Washington. We have a difficult time for people to find homes and do it affordably. So we have to be addressing housing and the affordability of that. Another key item would be the energy adequacy and the grid reliability. As we continue to make changes toward a more electrified society, we will need more electricity. And currently we don't have the resource adequacy to provide that energy. And quite honestly, the grid needs to be redone. Because it is not equipped to handle the loads that are being projected. But we also have drug addiction and mental health issues that have to be addressed. And, that's just some of the things, but as you mentioned, there are many things that we have to address in the state, and there are others that I would consider a very high priority also.
Thank you. Mr. Mayhew, same question.
Well, hello, Nadine, and thank you all for tuning in and hearing us chat, Keith and I, tonight. I think for the top 3 issues that I see, the first, particularly for Snohomish County, but all across the 12th district, is transportation funding. We've got to finish widening 522 now, not later. We've been waiting too long already. We need to fix US 2 to and through Sultan. We've got funding issues for the Confluence Parkway over in Wenatchee. We need more funding there, and then places down King County, part of our district. So the roundabout outside of Carnation that we need to add. Second is affordable, available childcare. In Washington, we meet 1/3 of the demand for childcare. 1/3. 25% of parents talk about leaving a job or not taking a job or not taking a promotion, leaving school or leaving training because they can't find childcare. And then finally, affordable housing. Over 33% of Snohomish County residents are housing cost burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. And the problem with that is once you exceed that level, you're going to have to make choices in other parts of the budget, sometimes groceries.
Thank you. Mr. Mayhew, we will stay with you for the next question. What qualifications and experience make you a good choice to address these issues?
So I've spent the last 6 years on the Snoqualmie City Council. That's a city of about 14,000, a little bit smaller than Monroe, which is our second largest city, and about half the size of Wenatchee, the largest city in our 12th district. So what's true of our district is we are small cities. As much as they feel big, those are small cities, towns, and rural areas. This is a primarily rural and small town district. So I spent the last 6 years, that's a full-time job, year in, year out. We don't go home until we solve the problems. The last 6 years on the Snoqualmie City Council, where I earned a reputation as a strict budget hawk. We need to find ways to solve our problems within our budget. And then prior to that, I had a 30-year career in corporate financial management, largely working with large corporations, multinationals, and seeing and working with them and seeing how they solve at large scale big issues such as we have in Washington, finding solutions, finding ways to compromise, and get to outcomes for our residents. So I think the experience I've had both on the corporate side and the last 6 years on the Snoqualmie City Council will make me a great addition to our legislature and representing specifically the 12th legislative district and our unique needs for our small cities and towns in our rural district.
Thank you. Mr. Goehner, same question.
My background in public service started years ago as a school board member. So I have that insight into education and from the side of the school board, being a negotiator with the unions, and just making sure that we have a good environment there. I then went on to be a Chelan County Commissioner. I served 4 terms and 16 years in balancing budgets and making sure that all of the items that are part of that county government were cared for. So we had all the responsibility for the whole courthouse, the assessor, the auditor, the judges, the jail, all of the things that we're dealing with at the state level. So I've had those experiences, and through that I also had the opportunity to serve on the Washington Association of Counties as president, and also as on the risk pool. I was there. I mean, I've just had a variety of experiences in the public sector, and then the last 6 years being a state representative. And in the private sector, I've been and then also a farmer, a self-employed individual who's had to learn to live with a very unpredictable income, because when you're farming, you don't know from one year to the next, and yet you have obligations to your employees and to make sure that the enterprise continues. So I've had a variety of experiences, and I think that suits me well.
Thank you. Timer, please note that candidates will have 60 seconds for this next series of questions, and adjust the clock. Mr. Goehner, we'd like to start with you. This legislative session will enact the 2025 through 2027 biennial budget. If elected, what will be your funding priorities?
Well, I kind of mentioned them at the outset there about the affordability of the state of Washington and the public safety issues. And Jim already touched on the other item that I think is most critical for us, because it's a function of government, and that's providing for the transportation infrastructure. He's mentioned some of the projects that are specific to the 12th district, but in reality, what we have across the state is a real deficiency in investment in our infrastructure. Our roads and bridges and ferries are all in a state of disrepair and are deteriorating, and I think that we have to find more creative ways to bring funding to that element. But also we have the social issues that definitely have to be addressed. And when I talk about the social issues, I'm talking about the drug addiction issues and the homelessness that are really impacting a number of cities. And whether in the 12th district or statewide, those are issues that must be addressed.
Thank you. Mr. Mayhew, same question.
Okay. I think the things that we need to fund most urgently are exactly the things I talked about as being the top issues. In transportation, we have a fundamental problem, which is that we have three budgets: capital budget, operating budget, and transportation budget. The problem with our transportation budget is the dedicated funding to that budget is not adequate for sustainably taking care of our roads. You guys all drive the same roads that Keith and I drive that he was just talking about that are not in adequate repair. We all know that that's true. But beyond that, as I mentioned, we've got projects that must get finished. We've already waited too long. We're going to have to find a way to sustainably fund the transportation budget. We need to spend more on the other things I mentioned, childcare in particular, and we've got to solve affordable housing.
Thank you. Mr. Mayhew, we'll stay with you for this next question. What specific actions would you take or what policies would you endorse, if any, to address homelessness in your district?
Yeah, so homelessness is a difficult issue. There's a lot of pieces to it, but there's a few things that we absolutely must do more of now. And by the way, this isn't just homelessness. This bleeds over into public safety issues, law enforcement issues. So we do not have enough mental health resources to take care of the mental health needs of our homeless population. Between mental health issues and then the other big one is substance abuse issues. Between those two issues, that's more than 50% of that's the cause of more than 50% of homelessness. We need to do more to fund those to solve the homelessness problem. We need additional addiction treatment resources. We need additional mental health resources, including those that travel with our police, so that those don't all become police issues. And we need to find a way to live our values, try to help but expect outcomes.
Thank you. Mr. Goehner, the same question.
Well, we've obviously spent money on homelessness, and that is something that is really been a concern, because the more we spend, it doesn't seem to help the problem. We had a 10-year plan to eradicate homelessness, and we didn't get there. And what that would tell me is that we need to take a good hard look at what are we doing that could be changed that would actually address it, because this is more of a West Coast problem than it is even an East Coast. And when you look at some of the European countries that have much looser even drug laws, they don't have the issues with homelessness. And in what my observations have been is that we have to work on having accountability. It's for us to have those treatment resources, because a number of these people, they need help. I mean, they need to have the therapists and the facilities to actually get them on the right track. But I think we need to rethink what we're doing and come up with a different plan.
Thank you. And Mr. Goehner, we'd like to stay with you now for this next question. What policy and funding changes would you make, if any, related to public school education, and how would these changes improve the quality of education?
Well, this is something that we've been working on for a number of years. I mean, since the McCleary decision, supposedly we had reached where we needed to be. We came up with funding formulas that provided for the proper staffing and in the ratios, and that's really become part of the problem, because not all the districts can meet the needs of their students with the formula as it is. So one of the things that I have been advocating for and would like to continue to work toward is more flexibility in the funding of the respective districts. Oftentimes districts they do well because of the personnel that they have. And sometimes you have certain personnel that are really skilled and have certain expertise that actually lends itself to moving in one direction curriculum-wise. So I think we need to allow the local districts to have more say in what they provide and how they provide it. And as I said, in the funding scheme, give them more flexibility.
Thank you. Mr. Mayhew, your thoughts?
Yeah, so Our schools are primarily funded by the state. Then we have supplemental operating and capital budgets locally. The state funding is not keeping up with costs. They increased the per pupil amount about 1 to 2% a year. The total amount of funding for schools is going down as a percentage of the total budget, going down from low to mid 50s since the McCleary decision, now to the low 40%. We've got to do better at funding schools, especially as they struggle with shrinking enrollment in many of our districts. But I have a very different view on this than my opponent. He's opposing increases votes, have been opposing increase in K-12 funding, opposed computers for school staff and students, opposed affordable childcare programs, and opposed raising school levy lid limits. We've got to do a better job of funding and allowing our school districts to do local levies.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayhew, what environmental legislation or regulation, if any, is a priority for you?
Yeah, so the 12th district is one of the largest in the state, one of the largest forested districts in the state. We have severe forest fires every year now. So what do we need? We need more resources to fight that. We had a devastating fire around Lake Land this year, the Pioneer Fire that started out as a small fire. We didn't go attack it because we didn't have the available resources, and it grew into a massive fire that then threatened the entire city of Stehekin. Okay, a small city, but a very important one. So we need more air resources to attack early. We need more clearing of forest fuels. We need more construction of fire breaks. We need more resources for residents and for workers who have to breathe the smoke in the air with the adverse health consequences of that. So I disagree with this notion that we've always had forest fires. We have, but they've become much worse and the fire season is much longer.
Thank you so much. Mr. Goehner, your thoughts on environmental legislation?
Well, that is my priority, really, with health of the forest. I've been working on issues since I started as a county commissioner to try and get more activity in the forest, because in the late 80s with the spotted owl, we really shut down a lot of activity in the forest that reduced the fuel loads. We had people that were continually working the forest, creating those very fire breaks that we were talking about. They made it less likely to be a catastrophic fire. Having lived in the area my whole life, we have had fires from the beginning. In fact, some of the largest fires have happened many, many years ago. But as we had more activity in the forest, we reduced that fuel load, and it did keep the fires much more manageable. I got to give Commissioner Franz great kudos for beefing up the resources that we have at the state. She invested significantly. One other thing that I think we need to do energy-wise is to worry about the energy efficiency.
Thank you. Mr. Goehner, is there an idea or a position from a political party different from your own that you think is worth considering? Please tell us.
Well, being in the minority, there's, often what we're dealing with is the legislation from the majority. And so there may be ideas over there and a few things that I've talked with others about, and there are things actually that we agree on that really don't make it to the actual legislative arena. But for actual ideas that there may be some that, as I said, that we are not really communicating well enough with, even though we're trying. But with the number of committees that we have, there may be some in some committees that I'm not familiar with. But my goal has always been to work across the aisle. I've been a co-sponsor with, actually it was Representative Ramos that was most recently that we had a bill together. I also worked with Representative Santos, and we've worked together to find those solutions. So if there are ideas, I'm willing to embrace them.
Thank you. Mr. Mayhew, your thoughts?
Yeah, so remember that in capital budget and transportation budget, it takes a 60% majority to pass those budgets. Democrats don't have a 60% majority. So a lot of the most pressing needs we have must be solved with bipartisanship, and we must get Republican votes to solve problems like the transportation problem that I talked about. The guy that currently holds this seat that Keith and I are running for is now running for a county commissioner seat, and he's being heavily punished by his party for his bipartisan votes that he's taken over the years. Look, I think to the specific question, our rural communities in the 12th all want strong, reliable public safety. I was pleased to see that the police pursuit law was fixed this past session. I agreed with Republicans, as I think almost everyone in our district did, that had gone too far for our communities. Look, we've got to do better at compromise. We've got to get outcomes.
Thank you. Mr. Mayhew, how satisfied were you with the most recent Washington State redistricting process? And are there any changes to the process that you would recommend? Please explain.
Yeah, I chuckle because I was redistricted into the 12th district in April of this year. I quickly made a decision to run for office. I had previously been in a different district. I'm a Democrat. It was represented by 3 Democrats. I woke up in April represented by 3 Republicans. Okay, great. Then I went and looked at their voting records, and I disagreed strongly with some really key positions that they took. So we cannot have redistricting occurring this close to an election. Both Keith and I have had to run an election with 6 months until the general election. That's just not enough time for us to adequately run an election. So beyond the timing, which should never happen this close to an election, I'll say that the process of coming up with the 12th district is fascinating, east and west of the mountains. But here's what I think. We will do better when we have more districts that are evenly split between Democrats and Republicans and move us all to the middle.
Thank you. Mr. Goehner, same question.
Well, the question was how satisfied, and I would say not very. And the reason I say that is because the original, 2 years ago, when the original redistricting map was put into place, it was done by a bipartisan commission. We had, people from each of the chambers in the legislature, and they labored long and hard to come up with what they felt was the most equitable, decision for bringing that 60,000 people that needed to come from the west side to the east side. And the 12th district ended up being the district that had the most significant change. And, I would, the way it was when I first started, it was with all Eastern Washington counties. We had a lot of communities of interest, which is the key goal there. And so it made it much more, understandable, I guess, of some of the high priorities. And what has changed with the judge actually making a decision whether the legislature is not appropriate, in my opinion.
Thank you. Mr. Goehner, what will you do, if anything, to support a vibrant economy in your district?
Well, one of the key economies that really drives a lot of what we have in the 12th district here on the east side and the west side is agriculture. The workforce is a real key element to that. I know that what we've continued to do through the years here is made it more and more difficult for farmers to be successful. We also have a lot of data centers that have come to our district that have really helped build a tax base for particularly schools and for the local governments. So it really has made a big impact, and I was part of encouraging that move in that direction. So I think one of the things that we need to do is be very aware of our land use policies and make sure that we are not making it more difficult for people to locate their businesses here, and also be very aware of the labor issues that we have.
Thank you. Mr. Mayhew, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I agree that we need to concern ourselves, especially in a rural district like the 12th and all the other rural districts in Washington. We are losing farms. We're losing 2 farms a day, and that's been going on for years. So there are all kinds of issues why that happens. One of the biggest is the increased value of land for development. So we need to focus on that. But it's not just agriculture jobs in our district. We have a lot of clean energy, green jobs that are good family wage jobs. And we need to support the whole workforce in our district. So we've got to solve affordable housing. We're short 200,000 units in the state right now, and we're building about a quarter of what we need each year. So we're getting farther and farther behind. We have to incentivize more affordable housing being built. We've got to do something about childcare. 25% of people reporting that they don't take jobs, they're either underemployed or unemployed. We've got to solve that.
Thank you. There are several initiatives on the upcoming ballot that we would like to address. You will have 30 seconds to respond to each initiative, and we'll take them one at a time. So starting with Mr. Mayhew, do you support or oppose Initiative 2109, which would repeal the capital gains excise tax imposed on long-term capital assets of individuals with capital gains over $250,000? 30 seconds. Please explain.
Yeah, we should absolutely not repeal this. This generated last year almost $1 billion. It all went to funding education. The first $500 million went to early childhood education, and some other priorities above that went to funding school construction. In Chelan County, which is half of the 12th district, only 74 people paid that tax last year, and each of them had average income for them of over $2 million for the year. That's more than most people make in a lifetime. So I oppose repealing that.
Thank you. Mr. Goehner, 30 seconds.
I think we should repeal it. And I think the whole premise of it coming in, it's fine to, everywhere else in the nation, capital gains are taxed as income. And the only way that it was able to be passed in the state of Washington is that the legislature said, we're not going to think about it as income. And the Supreme Court did agree. But as I said, it's the only place where we've agreed that it's an excise tax rather than an income tax. Governor Inslee also had indicated that he would promote moving it down to 50,000.
Thank you. Mr. Goehner, do you support or oppose Initiative 2117, which would prohibit carbon tax crediting and repeal provisions of the 2021 Washington Climate Commitment Act, the CCA?
I do support repealing this initiative, and this was also one that it's not delivering what it intended to do. The whole idea is to reduce carbon emissions, and basically if you buy your carbon credits, you can continue your same behavior. And with the gas refineries and all, they do continue to do what they need to do in order to provide us with energy and pass those costs on to the consumer. There's so much more that I'd like to say, and unfortunately, it's short time.
Yeah, you got it. Mr. Mayhew, Initiative 2117.
Yeah, so I oppose repealing this. Look, we all know we have an enormous problem with global climate change. We've got to take steps to do something about this. And look, this is a long-term bill that lasts for decades, maybe permanently, and we can tweak it. For example, last session, we realized the way it was playing out was hurting farmers. They were paying a lot more in fuel taxes. So we fixed that. Let's fix it, but not repeal it.
Thank you. Goodness, where am I? Have you both answered that question?
We did.
I'm so sorry. Do you support or oppose Initiative 2124, which allows all employees and self-employed individuals to opt out of the long-term services insurance program? Mr. Mayhew.
Yeah, I oppose repealing this. This is a program that has workers. So a worker that makes $50,000 a year puts about $290 a year into this. What it does is allow that when you need long-term care, usually after retirement, that there's funds to pay for that. What do we require without this bill? We require seniors to either be lucky enough to have a family member that can provide that care or to spend themselves into poverty before we do anything about it from Medicaid, Medicare. We need to keep this.
Thank you. Mr. Goehner.
I support repealing support the initiative because it's a mandatory program. It only allows the $36,500 in actual long-term care costs, and which really does not return that to, I mean, it was ill-conceived in the beginning, and it's not actually financially feasible right now. So I think it's important for us to let people have that, not mandatory, but voluntary.
Thank you. At this time, you may ask the other candidate a question on anything he stated in today's forum. The candidate has 30 seconds to ask their question, and the opponent has 60 seconds to respond if you choose to do this. Mr. Goehner, do you have a question for Mr. Mayhew on something you heard tonight?
I think what I heard earlier was that, the being in the majority. I guess my question would be, how do you feel like you would be able to step outside the caucus and actually pursue a different track than what we've seen in the last 6 years?
Yeah, thanks, Keith. That's a great question. So you heard Nadine talk earlier about 49 districts. 29 of them in the Senate are controlled by the Democrats, 20 by Republicans. But it turns out there's a group of Democrats, about 5 of them, that have been sort of a much more moderate voice. And you can do the math just like I can. If 5 people lead the caucus on any particular issue, then it's a 25-24 vote that doesn't go the way of the party. And that's happened in a lot of key bills. I am a moderate Democrat. In some bills, I will be that independent voice. We've seen that be something that is happening and that has been successful in perhaps keeping us to some of the more moderate positions. I'd like to be one of those voices and particularly bring the perspective of rural communities, which are too often not represented by urban districts, which many districts are represented by Democrats in.
Thank you. Mr. Mayhew, do you have a question that you'd like to ask Mr. Goehner?
Yeah, Nadine, we should stick to something that's already come up tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
Something you heard tonight.
Gotcha. So I think with transportation funding, we talked a bit about that. I think not, as I've talked about a couple times, I think it's very important to get some of these transportation projects done. Keith, I think you have some concerns about funding new projects. Perhaps you could talk more about that.
Well, I did sponsor an amendment to the budget, which was approved in the House and the Senate, to actually look at other funds within the state, because we've had unanticipated revenues at the state level. Our budget has doubled in the last 10 years. And I believe that by adjusting our priorities, we actually could be addressing some of those projects that have been on hold. And now with the cost overruns, and I think you alluded to those earlier, we have really backed up the queue of the projects that are really necessary for getting ahead of the demand, because it's so much more cost effective to do things proactively rather than reactively once the issue is at hand. So I do think that by looking at other funding sources within the state with current funding, that we actually could find ways to do the transportation budget more feasibly. And then also, when we look at new car sales, if that sales tax would be put in the transportation fund, that would help.
Thank you. We've covered a lot of ground tonight, and I think I'd like to move to our final question, and we're going to start with Mr. Mayhew. Actually, we're going to start with Mr. Goehner. This is the final question. Please tell us something about your life experience that might surprise or intrigue voters.
Well, it was just going to be a little fun fact, was that I was the first juror under 21 who was actually a jury foreman also. So I thought that might be just a little bit interesting. But that happened back when I was in college. And it was a great experience. It was one of those times where we had an opportunity to work together within a jury setting, and to be asked to be the foreman at that time, and to work through the issues that we had. It seemed like a pretty straightforward case, and yet when you have people that seem to have different ideas, it's critical that you can bring together, and that there can be a point of compromise where you can reach a decision that you can all embrace. And that was it was a fun experience for me, but it was also a real awesome responsibility when you're part of that legal system.
Thank you. Mr. Mayhew, same question.
So you see a successful, I talked about 30-year business career. I grew up with a single mother, often below the poverty line, and I ended up in foster care as a teen. After working my way through high school, I worked for 3 years and saved up money, put myself through the University of Washington with a lot of help. Thank God for Pell Grants and the state assistance we give in-state residents here. But then went on to a great 30-year career. So when I talk about some of these policy things that we've talked about tonight, that's not just policy ideas, it's personal. I want the same thing for every kid in our district, the same opportunity that I had. I'm a result of our public schools. I want strong public schools so they can succeed. I want adequate housing so they don't live with housing insecurity. And so that's kind of an interesting thing about me.
Thank you so much. The League thanks these candidates for joining us and for running for office. We encourage you to explore additional information about these and all candidates. Recordings of our forums, including forums from the primary election, are available at the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County website and our YouTube and podcast channels. Find links at lwvsnoho.org. Vote411.org, sponsored by the League, is another good source of information. The Snohomish County voter pamphlet is being mailed now, so watch for that. Ballots will be mailed starting October 17th, and Election Day is Tuesday, November 5th. Please be a voter. Thank you to our League Candidate Forum team, and special thanks to Dave Moon and the Salton School Student Director